Hello, and thank you for calling the Higher Self Hotline, your direct line to the divine. You've been led here by your inner knowing, and you've arrived right on cue. I'm your host, Zoe Greco, and together we'll make the ethereal earthly, helping you consciously embody your spiritual knowing and most authentic self. Please listen carefully to the following options. To discover how to fulfill your soul's purpose, press 1. To unlock infinite abundance in life, love, and career, press 2. To heal your mind, body, and spirit, press 3. To speak with your personal spirit guides, press 0. Please hold while we connect you to your highest timeline. Hello, Divine Darlings, and welcome back to the Higher Self Hotline. I'm your host, Zoe Greco. Thank you so much for joining me today. And today's conversation, I'm already going to call it, will blow your mind. First of all, the small world connection between myself and today's incredible guest is utterly astounding. She herself had to remind me of this experience, but when we tell you, you're going to get a little giggle. But more importantly, we are about to have a conversation that spans all realms of spirituality, science, medicine, near-death experience, mother wounds. There is so much for us to cover, and there is no better guest to do this with than the one, the only, Dr. Lotte Valentin. Dr. Lottie is an NMD, author, evidential psychic medium, medical medium, ancestral healer, and international keynote speaker, known for bridging science and spirit to unlock profound healing. After experiencing 2 near-death out-of-body experiences that awakened her intuitive gifts, she was guided to attend medical school and was accepted at the age of 54. She's the author of Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, which won first place in spiritual leadership at the 2021 Living Now Book Awards, and the host of Dr. Lottie, Science with Soul, ranked among the top 5% of podcasts globally. Dr. Lottie teaches with the Shift Network, Humanities Team, and the Theosophical Society, and frequently speaks for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Dr. Lottie, welcome to the show. We are honored to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's going to be such a fun experience to speak with you today.
So when we first began this conversation, you had mentioned a recent move to Tucson from Phoenix. And I said, I'm in Phoenix. And you said, I know, we've met before. So would you like to tell listeners about that experience?
Right? I think it was it like right before, right after the pandemic? And
I think right before
the pandemic hit. And my daughter said, oh, this woman is selling her singing bowls. And so we went to your place, to your home, and my daughter purchased your singing bowls. So, I mean, it's such a small world. It makes you laugh when you realize how connected we really are, because we sometimes don't realize. I tell people, all the people that you don't like in the world, you're probably the 5th cousin of that person. So maybe you should be a little bit more careful about, who you push away in your life, because, it's just a few generations that, you go back and then you realize that you have all these different connections with people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would be honored to be 5th cousins with you, Dr. Lottie. I think it would be, although I can't say I have any Swedish ancestry in my blood, but you never know. Go back far enough and maybe we come from the same star seed. So
right, because when you look at your gene, I did like 23andMe many years ago. And my children are more Swedish than I am. So half of my gene pool came from all different places in Europe. So it's really fascinating. But because my American husband had Swedish ancestors, our children are more Swedish than I am. And I'm the one who grew up there. So it's really interesting. That's why I say we really are more connected than we think, even like through DNA.
Wow. And I love that you're already bringing up DNA. This is really the scientist and the doctor in you. But before we get to all of the amazing things we're going to discuss today, I would love to give listeners an opportunity to understand a little bit more about your journey into this current version and iteration of your purpose, because we've seen, and some of what I mentioned in your intro, obviously, there's been some pretty wild twists and turns that brought you to this place. So can you take us on a little bit of that journey to what has brought you into this current version of the way that you live your purpose.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. So I grew up in Sweden. I moved to the United States when I was 21. And I transferred into Boston University and I majored in business and computer science. Then I went to work at IBM as a programmer and systems analyst. So talk about like a different beginning or a different start. And in my youth, I had absolutely zero spiritual beliefs. I did not believe in anything. Like if I had not had my own experiences and I listened to my own story today, I would say that woman is a lunatic. She's crazy. Like, what is she talking about? Because I was so scientific and I had no belief system. And I was confirmed when I was 14 because everybody in Sweden, you were born a Lutheran back then, and the church and the state didn't separate until the 1970s. So it was actually the church that kept track of your passport and things like that.
Wow.
So I know it's such a different, and we were all confirmed, with all my classmates. We all went through confirmation when we were 14. And when I went to first through third grade, we would start the day by singing songs in the classroom. The teacher had this little organ they played on. It was such a different time. And so that went on, because I was born 1958. So that went on into the 70s sometime. But I was already in high school by then. So, it's that early formative years. Even though I had all those experiences, did I believe in anything? Absolutely not. I thought you die, it's black, you're gone, right? So I went through life and I was working for IBM, and then I took a leave of absence. I had my first child, my second child, and then I had my third child. And this is where my life completely went in a new direction. So I gave birth, that was in 1992, and I gave birth in eastern part of Anaheim. So people who have been to Disneyland knows that Disneyland is in Anaheim. And there was an earthquake, the Landersquake, that was centered in the desert. And so we were in the eastern part of Anaheim. So that was right on the border. So we were really close to the epicenter. So I'm on the table contracting 3 minutes apart, this 7.4 earthquake, which was later downgraded to a 7.3. Doesn't matter. I still thought I was going to die that day. And everybody's leaning over me on the table. I would literally have levitated off the table. And we lost all the power in the hospital. And the hospital just, we're just rolling from one side to the other. It was a newer hospital and it was built on rollers. So it just rolled back and forth. And I'm thinking, this is it. We're all going to die. There's no way we're going to survive this. Those, floor to ceiling windows are going to come crashing in, or the ceiling tiles are going to just bury us in rubble. Well, we did survive. We didn't have any power. And it was so bad that my labor actually stopped for like 30 minutes. So think about it. If you're in the jungle and that lion is about to eat you for dinner, you're going to stop your labor and you're going to run and try and get yourself to safety. And then you're going to give birth. So after half an hour, my labor picked back up. I gave birth. And then we have the 7.2 earthquake hit, and we still don't have any power. So the whole hospital is running on generators. So anyway, finally I get to hold the baby. And as soon as they give me the baby, I have severe pain, like my abdominal pain. So I'm just arching backwards and yelling to my husband, take the baby, take the baby. And that was the first time I hemorrhaged. So all the midwives and nurses were massaging my abdomen and all these blood clots came out. So they keep me in hospital for an extra day and then they send me home. Well, this birth was so different because I felt like I had swallowed a bowling ball. Imagine having a bowling ball in your stomach that puts all that pressure downwards on your pelvic area and down your thighs. And I couldn't figure out what was so different about this birth. I had 2 previous natural births. So anyway, my friends decide to have a baby shower for me in the park. So I go to the park. It's like 10 days after my birth, I had given birth. And I'm in the park and I feel like I have to use the restroom. So I take my kids with me. I say, okay, everybody go to the restroom. My boys were 6 and 3.5, and then my newborn baby girl. And I go to the bathroom and I have this huge blood clot come out that is the size of, like a small ball, like a baby's head. So I tell my friends something is very wrong. And I go back home. I only live a few blocks away. And my husband comes home from work. We go to the ER and they come in, they do a visual examination. They say, well, there isn't much bleeding happening now, so we're just going to keep you for observation. No lab work, no lab test. This is 1992. And they send me home after a couple of hours. And then the next day, same thing happens again. And I start hemorrhaging. My husband calls the hospital. It's late at night. And I'm just yelling to him, I'm not going because they're not going to do anything. So they decided I should see the doctor the next morning. So I saw the doctor at 10 o'clock Friday morning. Same scenario. He looks and he says, well, it's not much bleeding going on now. It could have been a second lining that came out. Send me on my way. That afternoon, I bleed again. We go back to the ER. They come in. They do a visual inspection. They say, well, there isn't much bleeding coming out right now. And they don't do anything else. They leave me for observation. They close the door. So there I am in the hospital with a closed door. I don't have any way of contacting the person. There's no like buzzer or anything or bell that I can make somebody come check on me. So after a while, I start bleeding and I'm just thinking, wow, I'm finally bleeding and I'm in the ER. They're going to figure it out. And this is the divine intervention because this nurse came to check on me. And had she come, 2 or 3 minutes later, I might not have been here today. It's one of those, we're talking down to the seconds. So she comes in, she opens the door, she looks and she can see how much I've been bleeding. So I just see her horror on her face. Her jaw is just wide open. And I can hear the call on the loudspeaker. OBGYN, stat to the ER. OBGYN, stat to the ER. And she quickly cleans up the blood paper, puts down new paper. And within, 30 seconds, this middle-aged physician comes running into my room, like full speed, completely out of breath. And he says, what's going on? What's happening? So I told him, hey, this is the third day and I'm bleeding. I've hemorrhaged, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and now again. So 4 times in 3 days. And he looks in the wastebasket and he realized how much blood I've lost at this point. So again, they decide to do a visual inspection. So him and then probably the resident physician takes a look and they say, as they're like looking, another huge blood clot comes out. And so this is the blood clot that, that broke the camel's back, so to speak. So I try to sit up and I try to tell the doctor, I'm not feeling too good. But he knows now how much I've been bleeding because he could see the amount and the size of that blood clot coming out. So he understands what's going on. So he just pushes me back down on the table. They start tilting the table. My head is going to the floor. My feet are going towards the ceiling. I can't keep my eyes open any longer at this point. And I just hear all the staff filling the ER. And I have a nurse on my right putting a blood pressure cuff on my arm and a nurse on my left trying to place an IV. And as this is happening, I feel like I just jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. I'm just kind of free falling. And it's probably, a combination. My blood pressure is just crashing. I'm going into shock now. And I can hear the nurse on my right and she yells out in this panic voice, 50/15, hurry. She yells, and that's my blood pressure. So now we're going below, supporting a heart rate, and I continue to fall, have that sensation.
Wait, I'm so sorry. You're such a good storyteller. I feel like I'm my body, my emotional body. I'm like I can feel like I'm in the room right now. I had to just tell you, it feels like it's happening right now. This is so vivid. So please continue. Yeah. I'm like on the edge of my seat.
It is intense, right? It is intense.
Yes,
and this nurse, and I'm lying on this table and I'm thinking, what's taking this nurse so long? Why can't she get that IV in? But, when you go into shock, your veins collapse, which is, I've had patients tell me, I don't know why they placed an IV. I didn't need an IV in the ER. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's a good thing they did because we don't, you look good. And that's the thing. I was in perfect health. I was 34. We lived in California. I was tan. It was in June. I looked like the picture of health until that moment, right? So it's hard to tell just by looking at someone, what's going to happen with this person. And that's why they sometimes place IVs on people in the ER, which is a good thing. So if you're one of those listeners that got an IV, be thankful. So I'm lying on this table and wondering why it's taking her so long. But right after, this woman yelled at 50 over 15, that's when it hit me. And I knew that I was dying. And the reason I told the story about the earthquake is because it is a very different experience to think that you are going to die. And a lot of us have had that, like we're almost in a car accident. We're almost getting hit by a car crossing the street. And there are many incidences in our life when we think like, oh my goodness, that could have been my life right there. But this is very different. I knew I was dying at this point. So my complete atheist self that I was and did not believe in the spirit world and angels and anything bigger than myself, I said, well, if any of those stories were true when I got confirmed, this is my only chance at this point. So I said, well, if there is a God or anything out there, then, please save me. I have 3 children under the age of 6 and they need a mother. And as soon as I said that, I left my body. So I was like, okay, well, that was nice of you to say that. And I got pulled out of my body. And this first near-death experience is very different from my second one. So I was only out, not for very long, but in this state, there is a complete peace. You feel safe. You feel at peace. There was an understanding there is no time. There is no time in this other state. So past, present, and future information are all somehow merged into one. And you can have access to all these different time dimensions or whatever you want to call it. But drove me crazy for years trying to understand, why is there no time on the other side? How can that be? And why is it that we experience time when we're inside the body? So I'm in this state and it's unconditional love. I know that my body is down there and I belong to the body, but it's like there is no feeling of I have to go back to the body or anything like that. You're just kind of in complete peaceful state. So it's the sensation of you're driving your car. Let's say you live in your car. You're just in your car all the time. And then you step out of your car, you go inside the grocery store, you stepped out of the car, and then you get back, you step back inside your car. It's that kind of a sensation that you are still exactly the same person, whether you are inside your car or whether you are in the grocery store. You're still Zoe, right? You just stepped out of the car. That's the same feeling. You step out of your body, but you, the soul, the spirit, you are still you. Okay. So this body is just the bodysuit. It's like your car. Like, it breaks down and then eventually it crashes or dies. We get, we probably come back and get a new bodysuit, right? But you, the spirit, the soul, you're still you. So then I get sucked back into my body. And I'm, of course, very thankful because of my 3 children under the age of 6 that they saved me. And, there was lots of medications and injections and who knows what. And the next morning when I wake up in the hospital, my sister-in-law had just passed away like a few days earlier, and she was only in her 40s. And in the left corner of my ceiling, I can hear my sister-in-law, and she says, everything is going to be okay. And I'm thinking, if I tell anybody here in the hospital, they're going to lock me up in the psych ward because they're going to think I'm totally crazy, because my own belief system did not support any of my own experiences. So it's not like I went into this experience and I had a belief system of the spirit world or God or anything like that. I don't like to call it God. I call it source because I feel like religions just divide us, and the religions themselves are very patriarchal in nature, and we have forgotten that we once worshipped the goddesses and all of that. And that's the history of religion. So for people who don't know about that, go study that, because you'll see that is where the patriarchy originally comes from, is that Absolutely. All the men kind of charge and sort of put women down, right? And we are still in that space in the world today. So after this experience, of course, I got really sick and I had this struggle with a bone marrow suppression. I had bruises everywhere and all the crazy stories that we can go into later if we have time. My watch stopped. There was electrical issues. My TV turned on and it was just crazy. But now I know that a lot of people that have these experiences, there is something that happens with some, like the merging of the cell. I mean, we are electrical beings. That's how we measure the EKG, right? So we have electricity and magnetism and all these things flowing through us. And so when things are off and you get really sick and you die and you come back, of course there are going to be some electrical issues, right? Until that sort of stabilizes. And my watch is stopped. And then after 1 year, my watch would tick 1 month. After 2 years, 2 months. And it took 12 years for my watch to tick 12 months. And that is pretty much how long it took me to heal. So I'm struggling with bone marrow suppression. I'm super sick. I get pneumonia once or twice a year. And I go to the walk-in clinic and they say, the reason you're so sick and you're coming back is because you have no immune system, you have no platelets, you have no white blood cells, you have to go to the ER. And I'm like, I'm not going to the ER. This is 6 months after this happened. And we were on a wait because my husband had taken a new job. And so we were on a 3-month wait to get insurance. And we didn't want to pay Cobra for the insurance that we had because we didn't feel that hospital and that insurance plan did a good job. So, of course, my husband takes a new job and then he takes another job and another job. So we don't have insurance for the entire year. So we don't get insurance until July 1st, 1993. And it was a struggle. And by May, when my daughter was 11 months, I had a bruise that spanned my entire hip area. It was purple and red. All I did was bump into the changing table, something that would give you a bruise the size of a nickel, right? And the doctor thought that my husband was abusing us in some way. He pulls up the shirt on all my 3 children. He doesn't see any bruises. And I'm like, I'm telling you the truth. This is what happened to me. And he, of course, wants me to go to the ER. And I say, I'm not going. I'm going to get insurance in like 6 weeks. So I hung on and, finally got insurance. But I lived in this very difficult state of getting sick and having a suppression of my bone marrow. So it's called idiopathic aplastic anemia. And that is most likely what I had, talking to doctors later on, because I knew that every time I went to the doctor and they said, oh, you have pneumonia, you're way too sick, we need to do some lab work. But I knew that it was just going to end up, and I knew that I was slowly getting better. So I just kept avoiding it. And I said, as long as I'm getting better, I'm not going to go that route. And my father was a physician, and my mom worked in the hospital. So I heard all those stories growing up, and I knew a lot about medicine before I went to med school. So anyway, making a long story short, 2 years into this and I'm healing and I can't even stand up to make pancakes for my children. I have a stool in the kitchen because if I stand up, I'm literally going to pass out because I don't have enough blood in my body. So I wake up in the middle of the night and I always joke that they couldn't give it to me. They saved me too quickly the first time, so I had to have my second experience. But this second experience is so different from the first experience. And it's almost, I'm going to say, I just constantly thought about how can it be? How can you be outside your body and still be you? How does this work? Like what is this? Am I crazy or is there something to this? So in the middle of the night, which often happened, I'd wake up and feeling really faint. My head is pounding, even just keeping it on the pillow, take my head off the pillow. And then within, a split second, just like in the ER, my soul just gets pulled out. But the second experience is so different. So it's almost like Star Wars. You're just tumbling through darkness. I don't see a light. I'm just tumbling through space. And I get to this place that I call it the bouncing station because they sent me back. But I also know now that in my astrological chart, there was no way they were going to let me stay. I have to finish what I came to do until I'm done. So I'm kind of,
you're stuck here.
Okay, don't write all those books yet. So anyway, so here I am at what I call the bouncing station, and I get there, but there is this knowledge as if you go into a skyscraper and it has 100 floors and you say, okay, well, I'm going to the 50th floor. And so you push the button, 50th floor, you get off on the 50th floor. You can see everything that's on the 50th floor. You can see all the people, the doors, whatever is there. You know that there's floors above you and you know there's floors below you. You don't know what's on those floors. You only know what's on the 50th floor because that's where you are. And it was that kind of a sense that I ended up at this level, like as if there were floors below me or above me. And when I get to this place, I hear the most beautiful music. You cannot make this music on the earth plane, because I tried. I sat at the synthesizer for a week trying to recreate the music I had heard, and it was probably over 200 sounds on this Roland synthesizer. There was not one sound that I could make that sounded as beautiful as the music I heard. But there was also something, I'm going to say, familiar about the music. So it's almost like you've heard it before you came to Earth, that kind of a feeling. So I look to my right and I'm like, where is this music coming from? And I love what people see, right? So what I see is a log cabin, and it almost looks like a Swedish sauna. And I think it's just funny, like people see, oh, I met my grandparents, or I saw fields of flowers, or all these clouds. I see a little log cabin. And so I open the door, I look inside, and I'm thinking the music is coming from there, right? But it's empty, so there's nothing there. I look to my left, and I literally see a mirror image of the log cabin on my left. So I open that door, and I look inside, but it's empty. And then the best way to explain this is because there is the brightest, whitest light you can imagine. And this light is just pure, unconditional love. But it comes around and it sort of envelopes you as if you're standing, if you've ever experienced the fog rolling in, and the fog comes in and it's sort of, you're in the fog now, right? And then you put a really bright light, like a stadium lighting into that fog. It's going to be very white, right? So it's kind of like that. It's almost like being surrounded by bright white light fog. So it's just wrapped around me. But then as I turn around, trying to figure out where this music is coming from, there is an outline of angels. I don't see faces of angels. I see the outline, like the silhouette of angels in this white light. But I'm also aware that I don't believe in angels, right? I'm still it's like the scientist at the core. I don't believe in any of the things. And now I understand they had to show me things that I didn't believe in, because if they had showed me, if I had met grandma and grandpa, I would have said, oh, it's a hallucination. Of course, I'm going to see somebody, that I missed from the earth plane. It's my brain, blah, blah, blah. So, but that wasn't the case. I had to experience all the things I did not have a belief system in. So, but then this bright white light, that is whatever you want to call it. Some people will call it God, or whatever their religious beliefs are. I call it source. We come from this source, and this is the unconditional love. We come from unconditional love. We are love. We carry this light within us. And this is a light that we shine, right? And we say sometimes that person has such a bright light, right? That person shines his bright light. We are these beings. We carry this light within us. We return to this unconditional love and peace. So then I become aware of two spirit guides, and the spirit guide almost like what is she doing outside her body? She's been out too long, right? So because he says to the other spirit guide, what is she doing here? She has to go back, as if the clock is ticking. I'm going to say you can only be out of your body for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, maybe you can't get back in. Who knows? But the other spirit guide, says, and I'm responding to the first one, and I said, wait a second. How can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? Now, it's been over 2 years, and I'm still searching for the answer. Like, what is this? How does this work? And the spirit guide says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember. And now, with the internet and YouTube and everything, you've heard other people's stories, and, people talk about, they forgot to wipe me, or I got to remember this. I'm going to say there's definitely some kind of a mechanism of what we get to remember, because when you are outside your body, your mind and your consciousness it's just enormous. It's as if we live in a little tiny box here on earth, and we don't get to see all the other things. But when we leave the body, we have access to all the knowledge in the universe, right? And then we go back into this little body, and we're just kind of limited in what we get to see and experience. So the spirit guide says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember, but you will remember this. And then it's like, I'm standing on the moon, and I'm looking down on the earth. But around the earth is what I called the silvery, glittery fishnet. Because Now, this is 1994, so we did not yet have Google or search engines and things like that. Now you can just go to the internet and say, show me the grid around the earth, and you'll see a million pictures come up, right? We didn't have that then. So I searched it at the library for years for this. So anyway, so I see this silvery, glittery fishnet, and I called it the fishnet because it was this diamond shape. And I grew up in Sweden, so I lived on an island during the summer with no electricity or running water. And my grandmother used to lay fishnets in the ocean to catch fish for the family. And I would, finally graduated to be the rower when I was like 6 or 7. And when she lifted these nets out of the ocean in the morning, the water droplets on the fishnet would sparkle in the sunlight. So that was the best description I had, was it's a fishnet around the earth, but it's got these kind of sparkly nodes on it, right? And the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other. And everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And then with that knowledge, they sent me back. And for years, it drove me crazy. I searched the San Francisco Public Library, like for anything that could explain what it was that I had seen. And eventually, I just said, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm just going to give up on this. Like around 2004, my watch ticked for a year. I'm like, I'm healed. My life came back together. But during this whole time, I had been hearing the spirit world, and more information would come through. I would hear about relatives getting sick or passing away or visiting me. I would have spirit guides drop in on me. So after 12 years of listening, and in the beginning, I always thought, it's just a coincidence. Oh, it's just my brain. Oh, it's just a deja vu, right? Even though I had these 2 near-death experiences, my science brain was still trying to explain it away. It can't be, right? Because I was raised in such a scientific household, right? My father being a physician. And so after all these years, after 12 years, the spirit world, I was on the computer and I said, my kids are teenagers. It's time for me to go back to work, soon. I need to think about something. And I had changed so much through these experiences. I knew I had to go into healing. It's something with healing. And I found this school online, and it said naturopathic medical school. And I was like, wow, this is cool. You study both regular Western medicine, but you also study holistic medicine, botanical medicine, acupuncture, and you get to blend both of them. And then I realized it was a real medical school. So I said, oh, I can't do that. I'm already in my 40s. There's no way they're even going to accept me. I have to go back and take biology, general chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, math. I didn't have any of those classes. And I walked out to the kitchen, and as soon as I did, the spirit world dropped in, and they gave me 3 messages. And they said, you have to go to medical school, and you have to be a doctor. Now, we still have a free will world. So it is a suggestion, right, from the spirit world saying that, like, oh, this is your path. Like, listen to that. You found it, right? Listen to your intuition. And they said, you need to go to medical school and be a naturopathic medical doctor. And you need to bring messages on healing to the people. You're to combine East and West, and you are to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And I'm like, what do you mean writing a book? I have never written a thing in my life. What do you mean I'm supposed to write a book? And about what? And the spirit world said, when the time is right, we will tell you. For now, just focus on getting your degree. And literally within 2 weeks, I was enrolled at the community college, and I had to start with high school advanced placement biology because I was a business and a language major in high school in Sweden. So I didn't have any science like after 9th grade. So I had to start from the beginning, took all the prerequisites. And then by the time I was 54, I went to medical school. So I'm sure you have a gazillion questions. So I'm going to stop there.
I do. No, but I mean, like this, what I find so interesting is, you started, I'm going to use the word atheist, if I may, like, just being very religious, spiritual, which, by the way, quickly, I would just like to say, kudos on the way that you describe organized religion. I use the word spirit. And I was just telling someone the other day, capital H God, like doesn't do it for me. Here on earth, women create life. So I don't know how the patriarchy thought they were going to convince us that we've got a heavenly father. But anyway, as you were saying that, I was like, yes, feminism, anti-patriarchy. And we could talk about that all day long. But shifting from a reality where, everything was so science-based, you've always been a woman in STEM, from technology to, medicine, the embracing of these messages, enough for you to be able to at least pursue them in your own life, to hear these messages and say, I guess I have to go to medical school. What was that like for you to have to learn to embrace this gift that you now are sort of walking around with, this esoteric knowledge and this ability to receive divine information? Like, I feel like that itself must have been, along with physical recovery, along with emotional recovery from these experiences, being able to experience yourself now as a spiritual person and live a life that has these spiritual undercurrents. What was that journey like for you to awaken to those gifts and start to believe them?
It took a long time. It took me 12 years to listen to the spirit world. And I was in such disbelief when I would get information that I would start writing it down, and, pen and paper back then. So I would write things down. Oh, this is going to happen, or this person is sick, or whatever information was coming in. So I could then a day or two later go back and say, okay, it wasn't a déjà vu. I wrote it down, right? Because I started doubting my own mind, and there were just a lot of, information that would come through. And like, my dad had a stroke in like year 2000. So this is like towards the end. It's like I'm like 9-10 years into this now. And my dad had a stroke, and I called my brother. So everybody's in Sweden. And I called my brother. He's a surgeon. And he said, oh, okay, Dad's doing great. And, he was laughing at the jokes, and he lost his ability to speak, but they're going to move him to rehab. And I said, all right. And I said, should I get on a plane right now? And he said, no, you're fine. Like, come next week. And so this was, Wednesday or Thursday or something. And then Friday, I was going to bring all the kids with me, and the kids were like 12, 10, and 7 by now. And I said, all right, let's go to Walnut Creek. We lived in East Bay, San Francisco. We went to Barnes & Noble. We got, back then, books on tape and things like that for the kids.
I remember them well.
Right? Because it takes, from California to Sweden, it's about, it takes a long time. The flight itself is about 9 hours or so. So it's a long journey, plus the wait time and to and from the airports, etc. So anyway, we're at Barnes & Noble, and I keep telling my husband, my dad is dying. I see the coffin. And I kept seeing the coffin. It was a white coffin. It had a flower arrangement on it. And I kept seeing it from an angle from above, looking down at the coffin. Now, any funeral I had ever been to, the coffin is either like vertical or horizontal. And there were always, all the funerals I had ever been to were always in a church, because I grew up in Sweden. And I kept seeing this coffin, and it was like a diagonal. I saw it from an angle from above, from the right, looking down. And I kept telling my husband, he's like, you're just worried. I'm like, no. Something happened. And of course, none of my brothers called me or tell me anything. And then we leave Monday. This is Friday afternoon. We leave Monday. We get there Tuesday morning. And it's not one of my brothers meeting me. It's my sister-in-law. So we get out, and she just says, we have to hurry. And we basically just run to the car. We don't even go to the restroom. We just run to her car. She drives as fast as she possibly can. We get to the hospital. And I walk upstairs, and my dad was still alive, and he passed away within an hour of me getting there. But here comes the interesting part. So then we, of course, changed our tickets back home, because now we're staying for the funeral. The funeral is held at this place. It's not in a church, and it's held in a kind of like a cremation center, reception center. And when you walk in, the room was round, and the coffin was in the middle. And now I started understanding why I had seen that image. And so I said to myself, well, I'm not going to go sit down at the spot where the view would be the same as this image that I had gotten right that Friday. So I asked the woman in charge, I said, I am the daughter, and where should I sit? And she said, over there, like 3rd level up on that spot. And that was the exact view of the coffin. And the same thing, we went to look for flower arrangements, and I was with my mom, and they gave us like this huge binder of different flower arrangements of every color arrangement you can imagine. And my mom says, "Oh, can you help me pick a flower?" And I don't want to pick them because, again, I'm thinking, well, I know what the flowers look like, but I'm wondering if she's going to pick those or if that's the flower arrangement, right? I haven't yet seen the cremation center. So I said, why don't you choose the flowers, Mom? You know Dad the best. And she said, okay, it's between these two. And one was this like dark red violet and one was blue. And there was the dark violet red ones that I had seen in that image that the spirit guides showed me. And I said, Mom, you pick. And that's, of course, the one she picked. So, right. So what is that? That we see the future. We can see the future. Again, remember the first near-death experience. There is no difference between past, present, and future. And so it's all merged into one, right? It makes you wonder what life we are living here on earth.
Yes.
Like, what is really like already decided? And like, they keep telling us we have free will, but how much free will is free will and how much is already predetermined? Right? I say there is some kind of a combination of it all.
Yes. The thing that I also find so interesting about your story and something that I think is really important for listeners too is you have lived these two experiences that many, many of my clients and my listeners either seek to experience or dream of experiencing, one of which would be awakening to spiritual gifts. Like everyone wants to feel that connection, to know what that feels like. But second, was this journey of choosing medical school essentially in your 40s, choosing to begin that process and actually matriculating in your 50s. And so I'm curious to know how you felt that you would be able to use medicine towards your purpose. Like, obviously this was a directive that was offered to you, but you through your free will did say, okay, Spirit, yes. And I know now, you work as a renowned medical medium, but is that the vision that you held originally? Like, how did you envision medicine fitting into your story?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because even though I went to medical school based on the fact that I got messages from the spirit world, and I had been listening to the spirit world all these years, going to medical school, I was still thinking, I had the plan, I already had my name. When I graduate, I'm going to open my first medical center, then I'm going to open 2 more. I'm going to have 3 medical centers. I'm going to be the medical director. I'm going to help all these people. I'm going to do all these different things. I had it all planned out. As soon as I graduated, however, the spirit world had a whole different agenda, and I was studying craniosacral therapy because I was waiting for my license. So we graduate in June. We take the boards, 3 days of taking boards in August. And then you have to wait another 6 weeks or so for your license, because they got to grade all these tests across the entire nation at the same time. We all take the test at the same time, all that stuff, right? And so then I'm not getting my license until October. So now it's September. So I'm joined the clinic. I'm doing my residency there. And so I'm taking classes in craniosacral therapy, and I meet this woman, and she said, okay, well, let's have dinner. So we meet for dinner. We don't know anything about each other. And she said, well, I happen to be a medium. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Even though I had all these experiences, I'm still douding it. So
you're still skeptical.
Right? So she says, somebody is here and they keep bothering me, and they need to give you a message. And I'm thinking, and she says, are you open to receive messages? And I'm thinking, there is no way she's going to be able to get anything right. She doesn't know anything about me. I didn't even grow up in this country. Okay. So anyway, I said, sure. I'm just kind of smiling and saying, there's no way she's going to get anything right. Right. So she starts talking. It's very clear it's my mom. And it's also very clear that, she's connected to my mom, because she starts talking about rowing the boat and laying fish nets. I'm like, okay, well, this is not something anybody could even guess about me. Right. So I start understanding this is my mom. And the message is, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College and study mediumship. And I'm like, I can't go to Arthur Findlay. I just graduated. I don't even have my license yet. I'm the bottom of the totem pole in this clinic. I'm the resident. Okay. I'm going to be filling in for everybody else. I don't even know how many days I'm going to be able to take off. And the message just constantly came again and again. And one of the things they said, I did a lot of management training at IBM because I was slotted to become like an executive at IBM. And so one of the messages was, think of it as your training, your management training. I'm like, okay, so this spirit obviously knows everything about me, which was my mom. So then I listened and I said, okay, I will go to Arthur Findlay College. I don't know how this is all going to happen, but I will go. 6 months later, I'm at Arthur Findlay College. And again, I am thinking, well, this is kind of silly. Like, we're supposed to bring in a spirit for somebody else. Like, how am I supposed to know? I don't even know who these people are. They come from all over the world to study at Arthur Findlay College in England. And I'm sitting in front of this woman that is my first mediumship reading. Day 3, we finally get to start learning how to bring in spirit. First, we'd learn about psychic readings and things like that and how to recognize where the information is coming from. So day 3, was my first reading. And I sit across from this woman and she's so young. And I'm thinking, that's it. I'm not going to be able to get anything. She's so young. She probably doesn't even have grandma in the spirit world because she looked so young. And she's from somewhere in Europe. I don't know, from where or what language she speaks, right? We all speak English. So anyway, I'm saying, well, here we go. I'm supposed to say, anything I feel, hear, or see, I'm just supposed to say it. And it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong because this is what you have to do in the beginning. You just have to say it, right? And that's how you're going to learn where's the information coming from. Is it coming from my brain? Is it coming from somewhere else? And after you practice a while, you start understanding the information that comes from somewhere else. And so it's like a sorting process that you learn how to sort these messages out. So I get this woman and this little tiny woman, and she's showing me, she lives in an elderly home, but it's really small. And because it's my first reading, I still remember it like it was yesterday. And it's like an L-shaped cafeteria, and it's very small, maybe 7 or 10 tables. So it's not like a big place. It's a small place. And she shows me a cup of coffee. So I said, well, I see this little tiny lady and she lives in an elderly home. It's really small and she's showing me a cup of coffee. Do you understand this? She says, yes. So I say, all right, now, she's showing me where she lived and she lived in the countryside. Do you understand this? And she says, yes. And I said, she's showing me, it looks like a country kitchen. And when you open the door, you literally see, like loose pigs and chickens and animals behind this fence. Do you understand this? And she says, yes. I said, okay, continue on. I said, okay, she's again showing me a cup of coffee. She goes, yep, I understand. And then the last image I got was this cake. And it looked like something out of a Disney movie because it was like the 3 tiers on the cake. I don't know what they're called. And there's like white whipped cream, dotted cherries on the edges. And I kept saying, no, show me again, show me again, show me again. 3 times she shows me the same image of this cake. So I'm like, well, here we go. I doubt this is going to be correct, but this is the only way I'm going to learn. So I said, well, she's showing me this cake and it looks like this. Do you understand that? And she says, yes. So it turns out, and then our time was up. And she said, so then we have to verify information. What did you get right? What did you get wrong? And she said, I grew up in the countryside next to my grandma. And every day in the afternoon, I would go to my grandma's house for a cup of coffee. And that's what they did. Every day they would have coffee together. And she said, the cake she showed you, that is the cake my grandma made for me every birthday. So, it just shows that, we are still there when we pass on from this life and we go to the spirit world. And it's fascinating. Because going there, I still doubted that you could actually do this, right? And then I learned, my teacher saying, you were actually a born medium because that's who you are. You came to the world as a healer and a medium in this life. And of course, I doubted that too in the beginning. And I said, no, that's not true, right? But it was the awakening that had to happen. And I'm going to say, part of my journey now, the way I look at it is I came from that very scientific background. I didn't have a belief system in any of this. And And I think that helps a lot of people that I work with that schedule sessions with me. That's kind of what roped them in, because they're doubting, could it be, right? And that's exactly who I was. I didn't believe in any of this. And that's why I'm going to say it took me so long to trust it. Now it's, we're like 33 years into this. So it's been a long time, but it took a really, really long time for me it took me like 25 years to develop the mediumship, to trust in the messages, and to become the person I am today. And it's not something that happens overnight. And people who are looking to, develop their own intuition, there is literally only one route to tune into that which we cannot readily access when we're awake, because we're in this world, and that is meditation. And that is the best thing you can do, is develop a regular meditation practice. The more you meditate, and I mean, think about it. It took me 25 years to step into this role. It's not something that happens overnight. Now, there are people that develop very quickly in 5 to 6 years, right? But it's not something you are going to go to Arthur Findlay for 1 week and become a medium. Doesn't happen. I think the fastest I ever heard of hundreds of people who have studied there is 2 to 3 years. And it's one of the teachers there. And everybody talks about how quickly he developed, because that's almost unheard of. So it takes years to develop these skills and to trust in the messages that we get, right? And so I get messages. I see my strongest is my clairvoyance. I see a lot of things. So I'm going to say 80% of my information is clairvoyant. And then probably, it just varies. It seems to go fluctuate. I'm going to say the other 20% is split between feeling and hearing. So, and it just depends on what the information is. So if I work as a medical intuitive or a medical medium, I work intuitively, but I also work mediumistically, because the information is coming from the spirit guides. So when I tune into somebody's body, working as a medical medium, I often feel things. I'm like, I feel something isn't, if you have problems with your menstruation or your pelvic organs, or you have problems with digestion, or I'll feel pain in my shoulder, or I often feel those things in my body versus, seeing things. And sometimes I see things too. It just depends. The information comes differently. But everybody has clairs, right? We're all intuitive. We're all intuitive creatures. We just think we're not. So,
wow. One of the other things that I know about your work is you're not just a medical professional or a medical medium or a powerful intuitive, but you also use your gifts for ancestral healing work and working a lot around the mother wound. And I'm curious if your own personal journey or the experiences you had on the other side informed your path into ancestral healing, or what exactly brought you to incorporate that into your work. Because from the outside, it feels like your plate is already quite full. I mean, there's things that you are already, there's so much profound healing and wisdom that you can provide for people. What kind of prompted you to add ancestral healing to that list?
It's a great question. Actually, it was experiences I had doing mediumship readings for people. And I had like 3 or 4 readings in a row that were almost exactly identical. To the point when you're like, am I talking to the spirit I talked to, a few days ago?
Yes.
And then you're like, okay, no, I'm not. And the scenario was the same every time. And it was a female client in her like 50s or 60s. And grandma would come in, and the first thing I would see was grandma had a hard life. Grandma was abused by grandpa. And then I would see the children, and then I would say, oh, your mom was like one of these children, and she was also abused. And then she married someone who is your father, but he was also abusive. Like, does this make sense to you? And the client would say, yeah, that's exactly right. And so I could see that pattern. It was an abusive pattern that I saw that was passed down from grandpa to mom, and then to the client. And, it just keeps going on. And so then I studied ancestral healing, which is a form of counseling. And then, of course, the way I work with it, because I also work mediumistically, right? And that's the spirit world is always kind of present. Whether I know who it is or not, the spirit guides are always sort of chiming in and giving me information. And sometimes I know things about people before they get on my screen, right? How could I know? Because the spirit guides, because I'm always connected. It's part of who I am at this point. So studying ancestral healing then led me to the mother wound, which is we all have a mom. We all came from mom. And guess what? A lot of our issues actually stem from mom. Whether you say you had the most wonderful mom like I did, oh, mother wound, that's not for me. I love my mom. My mom was great, But when you have a mom that's loving and nurturing, I'm going to say your wounds are just sort of hidden under the surface, and it's not something that you would immediately connect to your mom. So it is just the way, she was, and she nurtured, and the way you were raised. So it's a combination of what is the DNA you inherited and what did your ancestors do, right? So we are entangled via quantum mechanics. We are entangled via quantum physics to our ancestors, right? And through this grid or the invisible net or Indra's net, because we are all connected to each other, right? So your own life experiences are, of course, how you experienced life, how you were treated, what happened to you, your own experiences. But ultimately, why did you have to have those experiences? And that's when we start taking a look at the ancestors. Where did they come from? Where did mom and dad come from? What was mom's experience in her childhood? What was her mom, your grandma's experience? The egg you came from was made, your mom made that egg when she was the 20-week-old fetus in your grandma's womb. What was going on in grandma's life at that time? We know, even via scientific studies, that we pass down trauma on the DNA, right? So we already have identified genes, the FKBP5 gene and some other genes. We already have those studies. Now we can see how trauma is passed down. Then you have your own lived experiences that you also lived through different conditions that might have been not the greatest, or sometimes they're kind of hidden. Many times people feel, oh, it was my dad that was the bad person. But then when you start looking at it, it's actually a mother wound in the end. So, because mom was the person who was married to that person. So you untangle all of that. And we are all entangled, right, via quantum physics. And the people that received the Nobel Prize 2 or 3 years ago was 3 physicists. And they proved the entanglement of particles. So if you have 2 particles here and then another 2 particles, in a different room, if you take one of those particles from each pair and they meet, well, it's obvious they're entangled. But the particles that were left behind are now also entangled because they were buddies with the particle that met the other particle. So think of it, if you have, your friend's friend, you're entangled with your friend because that's your best friend. But you're now entangled with her friends that you have never met, right? That is entanglement. So do we inherit all the problems from our ancestors? Of course not. And there is certain ways that things have a way of trickling down, depending on your birth order, depending on what the problem is. You sort of have to sort that out. Is it coming from your mom? Is it coming from your dad? Is it coming from your uncle? Who started this issue? Where does it come from? Right. But once we can see clearly where our issues stem from, and that could be we have relationship issues with our current partner. We don't feel good about ourselves. And it could be almost any issue that you have. But once you start untangling it, we realize that interconnectedness that we have, not just between ourselves and our parents or the household we grew up in, but it extends out to your extended family and friends, and through the time and through this grid that we're all connected to, and to our ancestors in the spirit world, because ultimately we are all connected. But when we create healing for these wounds, that is when you see a dramatic shift. And to give you a quick example is, many times people have lost the connection. They don't speak to their parents, or mom hasn't spoken to their daughter or son for years, or their own mother, right? It's common. It's way more common than we think. And we do one of these healings. They either take my course or they work one-on-one with me. And then 2 weeks later, I get an email and it says, guess who just called me? My mom, who I haven't spoken to in 7 years or something. I mean, it's fascinating, because when we create healing for ourselves and we change our own frequency, we're connected to everybody else, right? So that our healing for ourselves impacts people around us. So all we have to do is really just think about ourselves and create healing for ourselves. And then that will trickle out and affect other people.
This conversation is really interesting because I'm 34, which is the same age my mother was when she was pregnant with me. And I feel like this year more than ever before, I'm really looking in the mirror and going, holy shit, I am my mother. Like there are so many ways that I am my mother. And my mother and I have always been extremely close, even in the years where, I was dealing with trauma or maybe, our relationship was strained because of things that we both experienced, but we've always been extremely close. And I actually found that I dealt with a lot of guilt when it came time for me to acknowledge that no matter how loving and supportive and selfless my mother was, there were still ways that I was negatively impacted by the way that she raised me. Mm-hmm. And I remember just like coming to that awareness and wanting to push it down and push it away, because how could I find fault with someone who gave their whole life to me? How could I be so ungrateful? And those were my own thoughts, not anything that, she brought to me. I think my whole life she's just said, if there's anything you ever need to tell me, you can tell me. Like, if I ever messed you up, you can let me know. And I just was like, I wanted to protect her from feeling like she had done a less than lackluster job, or like, a less than perfect job in taking care of me, because it was her only desire was to do that well and do that right. But I also found that as those awarenesses came up for me, I noticed a lot of changes in my body. So I'm curious, do you find that the work that you do on the ancestral healing level also impacts the physical wellness work that you do with people as a medical medium and as a doctor?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you said, you didn't want to tell your mom and you wanted to protect her, that's a mother wound right there, because
exactly
because you have to protect her. And it often happens when you don't want to hurt mom's feelings, right? Yeah. So then I'm going to say, in order to create healing, there's always, it doesn't matter if it's an emotional, spiritual, or physical. I'm going to say you always have to work on all three in order to create that deep healing, because it's, if you take a medication, you might feel better, and that's great. We want to get rid of the pain and things like that. But how do we fix it in the long term? And I say there's always an emotional component that needs to be worked on, and a spiritual component. So when I work with ancestral healing, sometimes people have physical conditions. That also can be an ancestral wound that causes the physical condition. But it's one of those things that you can never go wrong by resolving your issues ancestrally, because it's when that light bulb goes on and you realize why it is you're struggling with that. Why is it that even you're thinking that if you're a woman, a common issue with women is, my partner is not helping out enough. I'm always unloading the dishwasher 4 times and he only does it once. And I plan the groceries, I carry the mental load, and all of these different things, right? Which is still true for most of the women, because we're in a spot right now and we're trying to create awareness for this issue. But when you're having those feelings saying, my partner's not doing enough, you're thinking it's just the partner. How do I change the partner? But the truth is that it often comes from a mother wound, because we have to take a look at where we came from, how we were raised, how was mom raised, how was grandma raised, and take a look at. But once we see it, right? Once we can see why it is we're struggling, then we can do the healing. And we always send healing. So the person could have been, you could have had an abusive father who was an alcoholic and very abusive in many different ways, maybe physically, emotionally, verbally, whatever. But when you realize where the wound is coming from, we create the healing, but we always send healing to the people who created the wound. So it's not that you're saying, blaming the people, right? You're creating an awareness of where the wound began. And then once you see that, you can resolve your own issues. And then you send healing, and you kind of let go of it and say, all right, it's over there. I see where it came from. I don't have to deal with that anymore. And now I'll move on with my life and create that healing. But many times we often repeat things. We see things go through 4 or 5 generations. People will say, my grandma, and my grandma, my mom, myself, my daughter, and her child, right? I mean, sometimes they're all alive because they had children when they were very young. And so it's really interesting because you see the same pattern over and over and over again. They're experiencing the same issues. So it's fascinating because we don't even think about it. When we just deal with our own issues. We don't even take a look.
Dr. Lottie, I could talk to you all day long. I cannot believe we're at the end of our time together, but I would love if you could tell us where people can experience your work, your book, your course. Tell us a little bit about the offerings and the ways that people can connect with you, work with you, learn from you, be healed by you. Where can we find you and what can we find there?
My website is drlottie.com. So DRLOTTE, drlottie.com. And please sign up for my email list because that's a great way of staying. I'm not one of those people that bombard your email inbox. So it's more like once a week or once every other week. But that's also how I announce different courses that are coming up. I'll be teaching a course for the Shift Network in the spring, starting in February. I cannot talk about what it is yet, but that's coming. There are other courses. I have a course online that I actually taught for the Shift Network last year. That is on my website. So if you go to School of Divine Spiritual Essence, you can see that. And that's a self-paced course of the mother wound. And I'll take you through the whole thing and then take you through resolving one of your own mother wounds. And then there's a healing at the end. But you can also sign up and work with me, as a medical medium, ancestral healing, messages from your spirit guides, which is probably the most fun session. Where I connect with your spirit guide and I draw a quick copy of what it is that I see. So you kind of get to see what your spirit guide looks like. But that session is really good for people who are kind of at a crossroad or just want to have fun, because it tells kind of who you are, because you're kind of a mirror image of your spirit guide. You have a spirit guide that is an expert in what you're doing in this life. So that's a really fun one because it creates an awareness of who we are, and many other sessions, medical intuitive, ancestral healing, wholehearted, which is a little bit of everything. So just go and explore my website.
She does it all, people. Dr. Lottie, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for being courageous enough to answer the call of spirit. You have been called into such a divine assignment of healing and leadership and being an example through your sheer experience. The transmission that comes through in your pure essence is so profound. I could talk to you all day long. And I feel like this must just be part one of a 2-part series because I think we have another conversation to have here. And I will be actually going over to your podcast where I will definitely direct listeners to go check out our conversation. But I just can't thank you enough for being here today, for sharing your voice, for allowing me to hold a microphone up to your wisdom, and especially for choosing to answer the call that Spirit provided you, because the world would not be as beautiful or as well without you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Well, there you have it, blessed babes. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode. And I would love if we could take a moment to send this week's subject, Dr. Lottie, some love, sweetness, and positivity as she continues to explore what is beyond the veil and help us feel into our own healing and wellness through her gifts. If you're interested in being on the podcast, send an email to podcast@zoegreco.com. Connect with me on all socials @thezoegreco. And of course, I want to conclude by reminding you that you are important, you matter, and you are perfect exactly as you are. I love you, your spirit guides love you, Dr. Lottie loves you, and the universe loves you. So until next time, keep answering the call of your higher self. Bye, friends.